I was always fascinated with the service, with military in general.
I come from a family of members who served in the military, so I felt like it was part of my duty and to honor them to join the military.
And I guess it was in our blood on my grandmother's side to serve.
It just ran in the family, so it was just something that we should do and following the tradition, and I've always wanted to do it since I was born.
My dad and my grandfather were both military people, so I decided to join.
My father was a staff sergeant in the Army Air Corps during World War II. I had exposure at home to the military. All my uncles had served in World War II.
My whole family served, so it was my turn at bat, so to speak.
My uncle was a World War II Marine vet. My brother went to Cuba, a Marine. So I just kept it in a tradition in our household. And then he joined.
I met someone who was in the Navy and talked to them extensively, and then decided to join the Navy.
I grew up during Vietnam era, and so I guess subconsciously, since Vietnam was the very first war, you actually see it live on television, I would see glimpses of telecasts, you know, and then maybe that stuck in my mind. That it was like a subconscious thought.
I volunteered to serve right out of high school.
There was a draft, but I volunteered to join the United States Navy.
At that time, the Vietnam War was going on. There was a draft, and I would have been drafted at 19. And what I did, I just pushed up my draft. I actually, right across the street here, is where the draft board was. I signed up to expedite the draft, which was, was going to happen one way or the other. And in September 1966, I went in the Army.
I enlisted in the Marines, yes.
We all volunteered. We all went. And even when you say I was drafted, but to be in the Air Force, you had to be a volunteer. I volunteered out of the Army into the Air Force, as everyone else did.
It was the draft back then, and it was only a matter of time that I was going to go. And I said, what am I going to do? Wait around for 6 months? What can I do?
I was just about to enlist, but then they drafted me, so I decided to just go in as a draftee.
Got drafted and went to Vietnam. I was trained as a mortarman.
A few neighborhood guys got killed in Korea. So we had a meeting and we said, we got to do something. Either we're going to go join the military or get drafted. So we didn't want to get drafted. So there was 17 of us that voted, and we voted for the Marines.
First, I wanted to go in the Marines at 16, and my father and mother said, no. And then 17, I still wanted to go in the Marines, and I couldn't go because you had to be 18, and a parent had to sign you in. So I told him I want to go in the Marines at 17. He said, no. You're either going in the Navy or the Air Force.
I graduated from high school in June of 1955, and the whole neighborhood was going into service.
A lot of my friends were joining, and I figured I'd join up too.
Well, in Brooklyn, everybody is close. And a number of the guys served and were in World War II, and they were threatening because each neighborhood had, I think they went by neighborhoods or districts or zones. During the draft, they were required to supply X number of troops or potential troops. And there was a threat that they were going to be called back. So we pushed our draft up.
So I went down to the draft board. I was still 17. I was 17, and I had my father's permission to sign for me to go in. So he did. He probably wanted to get rid of me because I was, I wasn't college material and I wasn't a good boy. I was always in trouble.
I went into the Navy in 1944, right after I graduated from high school. In fact, I graduated on Monday night. Tuesday morning, my notice was there. And I went that Saturday and that Friday, like that.
Obviously joined the military, U.S. Navy, because of 9/11.
Well, September 11th, I was a sophomore in high school when we were attacked, so that was probably my main driving force. I mean, I always had an interest in the military, but that definitely sealed the deal for me.
I actually was at the United Nations on September 10th, 2001.
Japan declared war on the United States. That's when I graduated from high school and I enlisted.
We knew why we had to go. There was foreigners who wanted to attack our country, and we were free. We were free, and we wanted to keep that freedom.
It's just the war came along, and it was sort of like it is today. You didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring, you know?
Being brought up during the Second World War, seeing these guys coming back, you know, and the soldiers, sailors, Marines, Air Force, and you know, they were special. You know, they were really special guys, you know.
They hit Pearl Harbor December 7, 1941. I was still in high school. I enlisted with a fellow I graduated with, but when they sent us to boot camp, we didn't go together. And to this day, I still don't know what happened to him. We left the city, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 o'clock at night. They put us on a cattle car, and they gave us, I still remember, an apple and a half a bologna sandwich. That was our dinner.
We knew that what those people were going through. We had never knew the knowledge of what they were, people that they were killing. They were sending to the camps to be exterminated. We didn't know all that until the war was coming to an end. But we did know that people were suffering, and especially I felt that the English people were suffering. At that time, they were bombed night and day. They had to take their little kids and put them in the underground, which was their subways, in order to survive.
I was on a small ship in LSM. We only had 60 men and 5 officers on there. And it was a flat bottom thing, and it really rocked and rolled like that. I got to see a lot of the islands out there, all the islands. And we ended up taking Marines to the occupation to Nagasaki, Japan. And that was I saw where they dropped the second bomb over there. It was just like a burnt out forest or something like that.
We were setting up for the invasion of Japan. That's what we were doing in Okinawa. And what happened was, while we were setting up doing that, and we were all the warships and everybody was around us, because even the kamikaze pilots attacked the hospital ship just days before us, and several medical people were killed on that ship. And then, of course, the big one was dropped in Nagasaki, and then shortly right after that, the cruiser, which, first of all, the harbor in Nagasaki is very long and very narrow. You can see it by air. They have a picture on the computer by air. And minesweepers were ahead of us, 3 or 4 of them. Then the cruiser Wichita was ahead of us. And then we followed the cruiser Wichita into Nagasaki. And when we were going in there, we had a few mines bounce off the bottom of our ship so badly that we had to all go back to the fantail back of the ship to make sure we got into the harbor at the same time. So then we got into Nagasaki, and we saw what we saw there, and mainly the only thing you could say that you saw was everything was burned. There was nothing. I don't care what the material was, human, wood, metal, everything was burned. We were in there to rescue the men that were held prisoner of war in there. That's what we were doing in there, to rescue those guys. And not only Americans, we rescued thousands of Allied guys who were held prisoner of war in there. And like I said, that all you did was smell burns. His name was Hutchison, and he was from Texas. I think his name was Ronald Hutchison. He was only about 20 years old, as old as I was. He was already a prisoner for 3 years. That's how long. And when he saw us, he was out of his mind. Well, I personally knew he was pretty sick. So I got him went down in the galley. You know what Yoo-hoo drink is? I got him Yoo-hoo, I got him cookies, crackers. Brought him back. He was the happiest kid in the world because he hadn't touched this stuff in 3 years. Well, about 3 or 4 days later, I went for breakfast, having a cup of coffee, and the mortician on our ship was a pretty rough, tough guy from Texas. He yelled over, "Hey, Ladderwagger." Yeah, I got your boy Hutch last night.
I remember when we were in Nagasaki, we were after we emptied everything out, we went out, we anchored there, and we see this here little guy, a Japanese guy coming out in a little canoe, and he looked like death warmed over. He was so skinny and stuff like that. So we go down the galley and we make up a package of food and we give it to him, and he's bowing. About 3 hours later, somebody says, "Hey, the guy's coming back again, you know." He brings back, and he has a chicken. It was so skinny and that like that. But we took it and we threw it away because we didn't want to make the guy feel bad or like that. But the guy was he was very, very thankful what we did or something like that, you know.
A plane crashed right on top of this guy, right on top of him. He was broken up, and you can't tell. Well, they have a pretty good sick bay on all of those aircraft carriers, but we were in the neighborhood. So they wired us, you know, could you come and pick this guy up? I was part of it. And in these metal baskets, we transferred him from Intrepid onto our ship. Well, we had a orthopedic surgeon on our ship who was a pretty well-known doctor, Dr. Mel Stevens. He was the New York Yankee doctor at the time. And he really did a job on this guy. But in the meantime, every 4 hours, day and night, for 3 weeks, I shot that guy in the butt with penicillin. You can't believe it. Well, we pulled into Pearl Harbor, like I told you before, and he couldn't walk, but he was really in pretty good shape. And when they took him off in that basket, almost the same one, he gave me a great big wave getting up to ship. I was 20 years old, but I was never happier in my life.
The crews or the pilot basically could name their plane, whatever name they wanted. There was a million different names, and it had art, was like what you have on Playboy now. And we had our pilot, and he said, "I'm going to name my name after my girlfriend. Her name is Bridget." Okay, that's nice. We can see now Bridget, Irish girl, in a figure with a bathing suit or whatever. No, he says, it's going to be Frigid Bridget. We all looked at one another. Frigid Bridget? That's what I'm going to name it. Oh my God. So anyway, that's what we named our plane, Frigid Bridget.
One time this young kid goes, "Hey, Joe, laundry, Joe, laundry?" So I had a little laundry. Yeah, he takes the laundry, takes it, they bring it home, they wash it, do whatever. Bring it back, and you pay him a little bit. Yeah. So that wasn't bad. But the one time I gave him a big bag, he never come back. That was the end of it. Yeah, had to buy all new stuff wherever I could get it.
So we were painting the outside of the ship. So it came to the bow, we went in like this, and nobody wanted to go over the side to paint the numbers on there, 307, which is the number of our ship. So I said, I'll do it. So I had a problem with one guy like that. He was really lazy like that. I was on his after him all the time. So I went over the ship. I was painting a number, something like that. All of a sudden, I hear this noise, and one of the lines was hooked up to a winch, and pulled the bosun chair up, and I went over, painting all like that, you know. And when I got out, the other guys, they were looking at me, you know. So I knew who it was. So I got even with him another time like that. The chief boatswain came up to me, he says, "Hey, Eddie," this certain guy's name, he says, "I can't find him," or something like that. And he had an awful habit of hiding on the ship and sleeping like that. So he said, "Help me find him." So I went down one of these compartments, and all the way up in front of the ship, there he was in a corner sleeping. So I walked out and I said to the chief, I said, "He's there." Chief was going to go in after him. I said, "Wait a minute." So I went out there. I said, "There was a big hose out there." So I went in, I turned the hose on him. So I don't think he liked me.
We used to put our beer in the airplane to cool it off, you know, in the Philippines, because it was hot as hell. So we'd put the beer in and, you know, he'd be up there and cool it off, come down, get our beer back. Lived in tents then.
In the Navy, before anybody can tell you anything, they have to blow a whistle in your face to get your attention. So they blew a whistle in my face day after day, month after month, year after year. And after a few years, I was out at sea and some guy blew a whistle in my face and he said, "Ladderwagger, it's time for you to go home. You saw enough." So that's how I eventually got back to the Brooklyn Navy Yard and got discharged. But
you got $20, $20 a month, or $20 a week. I forgot whichever it was. Probably a month. For 52 weeks. In case you didn't work, you know, that was your beer money or whatever you want to spend it on. And I spent it on beer.
So I had the dubious distinction of being a Korean veteran, and because the occupation of Germany didn't end until 1955, I was also an occupation troop for World War II. They built streets that looked beautiful, but there was nobody on them, and I walked up to one door. There were 2 or 3 story buildings, facades. I opened the door and there was nothing but bombed out rubble, people living in the rubble as well. They still did not have enough housing for all of the people, even 9 years after the war ended.
This time there was no celebration and no gaiety. Tanks, not floats, paraded in the streets. And the air was filled with bullets, not confetti.
My brother served from 1950 to 1954. He was in the Navy. So he was off the coast of Korea. And it was a long time since we saw each other. 6 years.
So we were kind of like bad boys.
Boy, Sergeant, when he took one look at me, I was a skinny kid. Well, he took one look at me and he says, "The United States winning streak is over."
We had about 800 or 900 guys on that boat, but we were stepping on each other.
The day I went into the Navy was August 4th. I went down on a bus down to Bainbridge, Maryland, and I turned in through the gate, and then there was about a 2-mile ride to the reception center. And along the way, for 2 miles, all I saw, because it was summertime, were white uniforms hanging on the line. And I thought to myself, I wonder who washes those uniforms. I found out about an hour later. you watch them?
Well, I was in Mount St. Michael High School, and the Korean thing started, and I went back, I thought back in the history of the family, like my father was fought in Ireland against the English, and my uncle was in World War I, another uncle in World War II, prisoner of war, one of my cousins. And so when the Korean thing, I says, well, maybe it's time to step up. So I quit school, and I went in.
Able Company, Baker Company, Charlie Company, ABC, went to Korea. Dog Company, D, went to Alaska. Easy Company, E, went to Germany.
I was in Alaska as a weatherman, and then after a year and a half there, I went to an aircraft carrier, the USS Hornet. So I was on the ship for about a year and a half. Our base was San Diego, but immediately after I got on the ship, we were scheduled for a Far Eastern cruise. So we went from there to Pearl Harbor. Then we were in and out of Pearl Harbor for a couple of weeks. And then we went on to Japan, to Hong Kong, Okinawa, the Philippines. Almost got to Australia, but that got sidetracked.
We took turns, divisions took turns, and regiments took turns securing the Czechoslovakian border. And that was primarily to make sure nobody came across unless they wanted to leave. But the Russians made sure they didn't. And it was a plowed up field, probably about 300 yards wide. And they had fencing on their side. We didn't have any fencing on, fencing was not going to stop a tank.
So we joined the paratroopers. We went to California, and from California they flew us over. And we went to Camp Japan, and then we went in. We made the last jump. November 2nd, 1952. Sunshin, I think it was, yeah. So we're going to Camp Japan. What the hell, Camp Japan? How bad could that be, It's not Korea. We'll be in China or Japan someplace. What the hell? Well, we didn't know that that's where you embarked to go into Korea.
So my brother was very, very involved with the veterans group. He's a World War II veteran. And to save me, he wanted me to join the Naval Air Reserve. So I was hopped up on the Marines. So anyway, he convinced me, but I was 16 years old at the time. He says, don't worry, he says, we take a little Incurator. That's years ago we used as a whiteout, and we'll put you down to 17. And that's what we did. We went to Floyd Bennett Field, and we joined the United States Naval Air Reserve. I was in VC 832 Squadron. When you're in the reserves, you cannot join another branch of the service, so I had to get released. Well, when I went to Floyd Bennett Field to get released, the commander there, Lieutenant Commander Copshaw, first words out of his mouth when I said I'm joining the Marines, he says, are you out of your mind? Are you completely crazy? He says, you want to be a mud Marine? So at first I didn't know what he meant. So he says to me, he says, how can I convince you not to go? He says, just ship over the Navy. You got a clean sheet. You only fight when the weather's good, if you fight. No, I want to go in the Marines. So he says, I don't know how I convince you. He says, would you like to die like a pig? That's just the way he phrased. And I says to him, well, nobody likes to die like that. He says, you're going to be a mud Marine, you're going to die like a pig, God forbid, but... Well, anyway, he gave me the release. I was considered a stalemate Marine. Now, the stalemate means that we could not go beyond our boundary. We could go partially into North Korea, then you go back to North Korea, back to your unit. You cannot overtake anything. And we were in trenches. So anyway, on the third day, they told us, okay, you're going up to the MLR. I guess it was around 4:30 at night. Now April is a rainy season, monsoon season. So this is, we started getting in the truck. There were 2 trucks and a Jeep and 2 Jeeps, one in the front, one in the back. Well, on the way up there on the road, remember in Korea, there was only 1 road. It was not 2 lanes, you know, one goes north, one goes south, one goes east, one goes west. So as we're going up, it started to get like Twilight Zone, and we got hit with mortar and a small arm fire. So we jumped out of the trucks, and I hit that rice paddy, okay? This pertains to the lieutenant commander. So I hit the rice paddy, and right all that muck in my face. Koreans use human waste for fertilizer. And I had it in my face, my whole body. Now, when you hit it, it's all water. So first I thought I got hit, because everything happened. I started to have dry heaves, a little diarrhea. I was scared, and I mean scared. Well, a bullet hit my helmet and ricocheted, took my helmet right off. If I didn't have it loose, who knows? So anyway, I'm laying there, and I didn't think of God. I didn't think of my mother and father. I thought that this lieutenant commander saying, "You're going to die like a pig." And it's so true, because the guy next to me got hit, you know.
I was assigned to the 5th Regimental Combat Team. They loaded us up on attack boats, and we went up the east coast of Korea, and I landed in I forgot what they call it, Samchak or something like that. We went up up to the front line, and I was assigned to the 10th Corps area, which was up on the east coast, above the 38th parallel, in an area called the Punch Bowl. We were up on a rim. Like I said, we lived in bunkers when we were in the rear portion of it. When you were up on the front line, of course, what they call the main line of resistance, you're you know, out in front of the enemy trenches and stuff like that.
I was a gunner's mate, taking care of the upkeep of the 3-inch 50s, 40 millimeters, 20 millimeters, and small arms, machine guns, rifles, pistols. And that was my responsibility, to keep the armory intact.
We were going in and clearing the area and getting them the heck out of there, because, you know, we were afraid they were going to get overrun by actually the Chinese at the time. You know, we were fighting the Chinese. We were only fighting North Koreans. We were fighting the Chinese too.
First you hit a horn, then you hit a bugle, then you hit a whistle. That means they're going to attack. As they charge, that's how quiet it gets. I got hit in July, but we had a lot of incidents. We got hit in July, and what happened was we were at the Imjong River area, and my outfit was like engineers. So we were building a road for the ducks. You know what a duck is? Okay, so it's a vehicle that goes on land and water, and ham tracks. So my platoon was putting a road in, you know. First we heard the horn, then the bugle, and then the whistle, and they started to charge, but they had to come up. So I got into a position to fire. At the corner of my right eye, I saw a guy throw something, and he threw a grenade, and he hit me and 2 other guys. And they put me on a stretcher, and they strap you in, and he checks you, and he looks at you, and he kept doing this and smiling like this, big smile, me and this other guy. So when we took off, right, it was a bumpy ride. So we took off and went into the Incheon Harbor onto the hospital ship. And every so often in the air, the pilot would look at me and the other guy, and he would say, and he would put his thumbs up and smile at us. So anyway, when we landed, he got out of the cockpit, came around, unbuckled me, and said to me, shook my hand, he said, "I'm sorry I gave you a bumpy ride." I'm looking, I said, what am I doing? I thought this was $1 million room. He says, could you walk? I said, yeah. He says, you got to get back, because we got hit very bad with Bunker Hill, we got hit with York, we got hit with, oh my God, East Berlin. Those are the Marine sector. We got hit very bad.
The only ship they lost in Korea was a minesweeper. You know, we did patrol duty or when our maneuvers, searching for mines and stuff like that.
I was on a ship for about 1.5 years, and I saw one accident, only one. And it was a tragic thing because it was at twilight, which is the worst time to be landing. And the pilot came in, and as you know, I think you know, there's an arresting gear and a hook that catches it, and that stops the plane from going 120 miles an hour to nothing. Well, he thought that he missed the arresting gear, and he hit the power, and the arresting gear was still attached, and he put the power to it, so the plane went like this and then right down into the water, went directly down. He never had a chance to, eject or anything else. So we searched for him for half the night, never found him.
Of course, never thinking that I'd end up getting shot at, It's funny, the doctor says, when did you start smoking? I said, when they started shooting at me. I never smoked. When they started shooting at me, I started smoking. I was coughing my brains out. I didn't know what was worse, the cigarettes or the bullets.
We had one young guy, a fellow named Herbie Swenson, who was a young fellow, and he was just married. Most of the guys in my outfit were not married and stuff like that because we were, you're young, you're only 20. But he got married early, and he was a little on the shaky side, but we put him in a Jeep once and sent him up to the front line, and he didn't get hurt on the way back there. By that now of course he knew and his whole attitude changed.
I was in the third lift. The first lift that went in, they were catching it a lot. Then I was in the second lift. When we were going in, they were getting the hell out of there because nobody's going to stick around seeing guys coming down out of the sky. You would run too, right? So we were okay, but the guys that were there just before us, they caught hell, Nobody ever said Geronimo jumping out of the plane. Oh my God, that's what they said.
When I first got to Korea, they put me down in Kojiro and put me in the unit that I was going to be with. Although we weren't assigned, but that was big prisoner of war camp down there.
Right.
Okay. And they kept the civilian internees, civilian internees in one section, and North Korean soldiers in another section. We had no problem with the North Korean soldiers, but we had big time problems with the what they call non-combatants. They captured the general from at that time and held him prisoner for quite some time and had to storm the area.
I was in the back of a deuce and a half truck. They were moving us from one place to another. And refugees were all along the roads, And there was these little kids, And you look at them, they had no expression, just fear in their face. Like they don't know where they were going. They don't know what's going to happen to them,
We go on patrol this day, and we come to the slough village, and there was a massacre there. A few people had their heads tied. They blew their heads off, and there were 3 little children, and two mothers. They were dead. There were 2 little girls, by these two women, full of blood, but they were not hurt. There was a little boy crying his eyes out. I mean, you could have heard him miles. His hand was blown off, completely blown off, okay? Well, I ran over there, I yelled for the corpsman, I grabbed him. As soon as I grabbed him, he put his arm around me, one arm, and he was strangling me. That's how, he was about 6 years old. So I took his hand, I put it in my pocket, all right? So I tried to reach for my pouch for the bandage, and I started to open it up. The corpsman came running. He wrapped the bandage, and it was kind of not bleeding as much though. It didn't happen. It happened a while. So he took his arm and put it over here, the one with no hand, and he had me in a headlock. I couldn't get out. So one of the local people told us down the road there's an orphanage. The corpsman jumped out with the two little girls. I jumped out with the little boy, and I ran naturally into the building, and there was a minister and two women, but there was also an army captain there. He was from the 2nd Division. Oh God, his name, Riley, I think it was, Riley or something. Not to get off the subject, but this, well, I'll tell you later. So the little boy, they put the little boy down. They couldn't get him out of my arms. It was terrifying. I was really choking. So I finally got the hands out, and he had one hand like this, trying for me. They put him on a table, laid him flat. One of the Korean women were holding him, and they says, "You can't do nothing no more." So me and the corpsman, this other woman checked the girls. We went outside, and we went in the Jeep, and I said, I just remembered I got his hand. So I get out of the Jeep, I run back in, take the hand out of my pocket, and I give it to the doctor. The doctor turned to me and said he died. Well, I cracked up. I says, what? He just died, he says. And even when he died, he had all tears in his eyes. Well, let me tell you, when I got back to my area, we got back, and actually the corpsman says, we got to get back, and I didn't want to go back. He says, we got to get back. So we got back, we went to our rendezvous area, and I'm sitting in a bunker, and I'm literally talking to myself. And I kept saying, why this little boy? And I saw like a halo. And to me, it was St. Jude. That's what I thought. And the voice said to me, now you know why you're here. And after that, I became a good Marine. I knew why I was there. I knew the reason I was there. We had to save these kids. We had to save these civilians. And I didn't want to fight in New York. And I became a fierce fighter. I mean, not crazy, but fierce.
We would go for 45 to 60 days at a time, winter or summer. And the ground was so hard you could not put tent pegs in, they would break. So you slept in a mountain bag. One night I fell asleep and I felt myself rolling and I hit something, so I just stayed there. And I woke up in the morning when I heard bong, bong. I was looking directly at a church steeple. There was a sharp drop off. If I didn't hit the tree, I would have gone right over.
The temperatures got 30, 40 below up in the mountains. if you took your gloves off, your fingers would probably freeze and they'd fall off or something. I mean, but we were pretty well clothed, not super, but we had Eskimo parkas and stuff like that. You know, we had what they call Mickey Mouse boots, the rubber insulated boots, and if you didn't take them off, your feet would rot. So,
in the winter, it would go to 20, 30 below zero, and my face was frostbitten. And they always told you to wear your gloves, especially when you had your weapon. Wear your gloves in the winter. And we got into an area where we went indoors, and the fella took his gloves off and then took his rifle and swung it around and grabbed it by the barrel. It immediately stuck to his hand, and when he went to shake it loose, because he said the cold was so cold it felt like he was burning, and when he went to get rid of it, it took the skin right off his palm. My face was frostbitten. It wasn't too bad, but it thawed out.
When we got back to Riverside, I became a short timer. I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was. So I said, no way they're going to get me on the lines again. So in March, I think the third week of March, we got hit very bad. It's an area called Vegas. It was Reno, Carson, and Vegas. They got hit so bad, the 5th Marines almost lost their hill. 7 Marines had to go up. So anyway, we were driving the truck, not me. This guy, his name was Mercer. He was driving the truck, and I was riding shotgun. They said every Marine was on the lines, cooks, bakers, because we got hit so bad. Major battles all over the place, not only there. Old Baldy got hit at the same time. Iron Triangle got hit, a lot of different areas. They made a big offense, okay? And so my buddy, Morser, he was very tired, couldn't keep his eyes open. So he said, could you drive? I said, I could drive. So I get in the driver's seat and I'm driving. It's pitch black, so I had to move up like this to drive, because I couldn't see. Really, it was so dark. You know, you really got to go 2 miles an hour. We get hit with a mortar. Hit the side over here, went through the cab, creased my jacket. I didn't get hurt, and caught my buddy in the side right here. Right in his kidney. Blood was shooting out all over the place. He didn't die, but he was bad. So naturally I had to pull over. And there's not many places you can pull over in Korea because there's a lot of rice paddies. So I said, what happened? I said, he's hit bad. He said, well, there's an army station, right? Whatever it was, I don't know where it was. So I pulled him there and they pulled him out that long and that wide, piece of shell. So that was meant for me. If I didn't look up, I would have got that in my rib. It creased my shirt right on it, right across here. And I says, I'm a short timer. Well, the next night, we're sitting in a bunker, right? Now a ship came in the harbor about a week before. Now that's a ship we were supposed to go on. You know, whatever draft you was, that's the draft that replace you and you get on the ship. So that it was in the harbor about 5 days, but we couldn't get on there. So anyway, we're sitting in the bunker, catching some, you know, this little short eye. Sergeant comes in, he says, Scalado. Well, they called me Guinea. Only my friends. So he says, Scalado, you know, Guinea, blah, 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 blah. I says, you ain't taking me out of this bunker. I said, I'll blow your head off. I actually took my .45 and put it like this. I said, I'm not leaving here. I'm a short timer. I want to go home. He says, you're not, you are going home.
Like I said, the experience coming home was one of the experiences of my whole life, because we were put on a boat. We went through the Panama Canal, back down to Columbia, South Carolina, Columbia, South America, dropped off to those troops. Then we went to Puerto Rico, dropped off the 65th Infantry Regiment from Puerto Rico. Then we came up to New York. It took me 31 days. I thought I was in the Navy. But,
it's normally a 10-day trip or 9-day trip by troop ship. And I guess the troop ship was a little bigger than the Staten Island ferry, and we were 3,500 guys on the ship. 5 layers of bunks. But in any case, we were at sea and we kept seeing the USS United States, which was a very fast ocean liner, passed us 3, 4, 5 times. And I said, what's going on here? We shouldn't be that. They never told us we were circling in the middle of the ocean because the Hungarian Revolution had broken out and they were considering sending us back to go in to the revolution to help out the Hungarians. But that never happened. And as I said, one of the fellows I bowl with is Hungarian. He was about 8 years old at the time, and he's still angry that we never got there. I said, sorry, I tried.
So we went under the Golden Gate Bridge, and that was a thrill. It was really a thrill when you look upstairs and you see that Golden Gate Bridge. And they had a sign. There was a sign up, welcome home, Korean War vets.
We went into Brooklyn Harbor, down by the Statue of Liberty, and we came into the Brooklyn Navy Yard down there. And from there, we were put on trucks, so we had a little bit of a parade, and they gave us a nice reception up Fifth Avenue. And after that, I went to Camp Kilmore, New Jersey, and I left the Army from there.
I had a friend mailing letters so that she wouldn't worry, because we were at sea for 16 days and she wouldn't hear from me at all. Couldn't mail a letter from the ship, so she had gotten a letter that morning. We docked, and I came home by Greyhound bus to Manhattan, subway, got in about 1 a.m. and I had to be back at Fort Dix. Not Fort Dix, the other camp. And by 5 or 6 a.m. So it was a quick turnaround. And she was shocked. She'd just gotten a letter. And my brother was already home. So we had a nice, nobody slept.
My cousins joined the Marines and the Navy during the Korean War. They were drafted by the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants in baseball. They were that good. And when Korean War broke out, they joined, 2 of them joined the Marine Corps, 1 of them the Navy. 1 of them was killed in Korea in 1953. He was only 20. So it was a family heritage. It was my turn.
I was a corporal in the Marines 2 times.
I was in an infantry unit, and my MOS was explosives.
Infantry training is just more, I guess, intense. I mean, you spend a lot more time firing your rifle, you fire machine guns, grenade launches, you spend more time out, you know, in the field, like in a bivouac situation. I was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. They had a Vietnam village, which we went through, a simulated thing of what Vietnam would look like, but it was like the coldest February. We were there in February of 1967, late January, early February, and it had to be the coldest time there. It was like, it felt no more like Vietnam than Smithtown would, because so we couldn't wait to get to Vietnam to warm up. I mean, it was freezing there, you know.
I was in Vietnam on the USS Ranger. I was in a reconnaissance heavy attack squadron. We flew combat missions, keeping the guys safe on the ground. And we were able to locate the enemy because we were reconnaissance squadron.
The first 2 years of my duty were on a attack aircraft carrier CVA-31, the Bonhomme Richard, and that was in the Gulf of Tonkin, which is the South China Sea, just off the coast of Vietnam. It was an attack carrier, and the mission was to protect the ground troops whenever they would be bogged down. We would send flight operations in there to assist them, and we also flew bombing missions throughout Vietnam at that time.
I used to do what they did in the Navy on the ships. The aircraft carriers stopped the planes, so I used to do that in Vietnam and back in the States.
Well, you know, we were taught early in boot camp. We had 80 men in my company. In short, in a 3 month period, how the Navy made us operate as one. Strangers from all over the country, and we operated as one, and that's what impressed me the most. And that just carried on with every military man or woman. That's our mission, to make sure everybody comes home.
And when I got there, I was in a fight for 2 weeks, and then the general called me into his office. He had received teletypes at that time; they had no fax, and asking them to give me a job in entertainment. Unbeknownst to me, it was the executive to Channel 5 that wrote the Pentagon, and my orders were changed. I dressed like this. I never wore an army uniform except for the Bob Hope show, because of the danger there. They wouldn't know who was who. And I was very lucky. I consider myself to be alive today because I had that job. I picked my own Jeep driver. I had 2 bodyguards 24 hours a day because the enemy would want to get somebody who's increasing the morale of the troops. But Phyllis Diller, she gave me an autograph of her face signed to me. And she said to me, "Kevin, I don't want to go in that helicopter. I'm a little scared." So I said, "You see that Chinook over there with the 2 blades? I have to strap you to the pole in a chair." That's what I did.
We spent many months at sea. 2.5 months, we'd come in for 8 days, go out for 50, flying around the clock. And my MOS, military occupational specialty, was a structural mechanic, fixing bullet holes and et cetera on the aircraft when they came back. We had 1 plane shot down. Both men were killed, the pilot and the bombardier navigator. And took us 3 weeks to recover their bodies because it was so heavily concentrated with the Viet Cong. So we finally got them out. We buried the pilot at sea because that's what he requested upon his death. And the bombardier navigator went to Arlington National Cemetery, and that's where he's buried. Every year, December 9th, that's when they were shot down. I go to St. Patrick's in Smithtown, and I light a candle on their behalf.
I blew up a bunch of trees so we can get some helicopters in. And unfortunately, they didn't all land exactly where I wanted them to. And, you know, I got a little bit buried with some of them, and so I just broken bones, some wood chips. And during that period, they were trying to, there was 2 other people with me, Lance Corporal Avisa and Lance Corporal Villau. And they were shooting at us, but we didn't know that at the time. And we created a landing zone where we were able to get out the wounded, bring in some supplies, and for this, the 3 of us were decorated. And that's that.
By the time the Tet Offensive started, I only had a little more than 30 days left in country, because actually the Tet Offensive probably started January 31st, and I was going home March 6th. So I had 38 days left in country. I was really, set to go home when that broke out,
We were going back to the States, and the Forrestal was taking our place, USS Forrestal, another attack aircraft carrier. Shortly after they arrived, they had a fantail crash on a recovery, and it lit the entire aircraft carrier on fire, the whole entire flight deck. A lot of ordnance was up on there, which are missiles and bombs and racks. They exploded, a lot of jet fuel. We were about halfway back to the Philippine Islands our carrier turned around and went back, and then we were actively working on rescue missions for sailors that were injured, unfortunately sailors that have died in the fire. So we were out there for approximately 5 days on rescue missions, and then the Forstall, once they got the fire under control, actually started to sail back to, I believe it was Subic Bay in the Philippines, and the whole time it was sailing back, it was actually still on fire.
You saw so many guys go down. I have an injury in Vietnam in my neck, and I was in a bunker. I still had to pull guard duty, no matter who you are. And but that unit knew I was in the Army. Nobody else outside it did. And a mortar round came in. There were 6 of us in there, killed 3, and I was one of 3 to live. And I never claimed it, because how could I claim it when these guys are out in the field and I'm doing shows?
The year and the combat climaxed with the 2 major operations fought in this rugged terrain just south of the demilitarized zone that separates North and South Vietnam. Operations Hastings and Preston.
And we got a presidential unit citation for being surrounded for 9 days by the enemy. My platoon got dropped, I want to say, in a place called Hill 352, someplace in the jungle of Vietnam by the DMZ, and where we immediately became surrounded. So it was pretty obvious that we were separated, and we had to do what we had to do with what we had. And so it wasn't, a lot of Vietnam veterans, we don't have any names for these battles, not really, because, you know, it was a different type of war. It wasn't that we took ground and held it. We took ground, we paid dearly for it, and then we were taken back. And then at another point, another unit would go take that same ground.
It's a completely different culture. And I mean, I remember getting off the plane, just hit you, wow, this is, you know, the air's different, you know, it was hot, it was, you know, everything was different, you know.
When people ask me, how was Vietnam? I said, hot and noisy.
I had the post office deliver my mail on my hooch inside while I gave them front row seats for a show. Everybody wheeled and dealed.
I was leaving Vietnam. I got on the plane and all my buddies were at the airport in Da Nang waving to me, and I started crying. Get me back down, I want to go back.
The Vietnam War was very challenging for a lot of people here in the United States.
We were probably the most criticized soldiers ever to go to battle, and unjustly. I mean, you know, I can't tell you how many times we carried babies from burning villages. And, you know, old men, old women, you know, Americans are great people.
When I got back to the States, they kind of stepped all over us Vietnam vets.
I know guys in my chapter of Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 11 in Suffolk County, that when they came home, excuse me, they tried joining the VFW, and they were told that they weren't in a real war. Yeah, so that's when the Vietnam Veterans of America started to develop, and we formed our own chapters. We have 800 chapters in the United States now.
A lot of our Vietnam vets were spit on when they were in the Veterans Day Parade, things like that. It's much better nowadays. Even today, I think folks have an appreciation for what we went through over there, even though it was an unpopular war. And you know, our theme now is when we meet another Vietnam vet, it's we always welcome them home, because that's something that was missing before. So yeah, times are much different, and thankfully that they are.
Actually, what was done to us will never, ever be done again to anybody. Man, woman, no matter what your religion, that puts on that uniform, they're treated with respect now. And I think that's largely because of what we endured in not being respected.
Our slogan is, never again will one generation of veterans abandon another.
They called me Marvelous Military Mel.
I used to enjoy camping, rappelling off bridges. I was sure I was going to be an Army Airborne Ranger. I was certain of it. But I had a few brothers in the Navy, and let's just say they encouraged me to join the Navy, and I did. And I was very glad that I did. You know, each service has its own strengths and advantages, but for me and what I wanted to do, I think the Navy was the best choice.
So I knew that Fordham University had a ROTC program, but they also had an annex at John Jay College in the city. So as I mentioned, I was attending Pace University, so I was like, okay, I'll make the trek from Pace University to John Jay, no biggie. So I went to the Bronx, went to Fordham ROTC, and I said, hey, I'm interested in joining Army ROTC. First question out of my mouth was, is there a test? They said no. I said, you guys got me. So I joined on August 12th, 1987.
I was one of the first women to go into the seagoing program. I went in as an officer, and I went to Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. And that is a 16-week program to whip these college kids into shape and teach them everything they need to know about being a naval officer. My first ship, I worked in deck department, and they didn't have a billet for a woman, so they assigned the women at that time as in excess, which meant they had to make a job for me. So 1st Division within deck department had about 30 sailors, and 2nd Division, which was the other half of deck department, had about 35 sailors. And the first lieutenant there, who was in charge of both, said, okay, you give me 10 people and you give me 10 people, and we'll make this other division for this new woman with 20 sailors, and we'll call it Boat Group Division. And we'll give her these 13 boats that we had lifted onto the ship. and we took with us for Liberty boats and for personnel carriers and work boats, etc. So that was my first job. But of course, you know, they gave me the very best of the sailors from 1st and 2nd Division. So I had 20 seamen and below, who some of them had been promoted 2 or 3 times to seamen and then busted down again to seaman recruit because they were not the sterling people. I had no petty officers, so I personally had to supervise everything, including sweepers. If I didn't watch them sweeping at the end of the day, because we owned a chunk of the deck where we had to clean every day, they would throw the brooms overboard. And then they would tell me they didn't have brooms, so they couldn't hold sweepers. So I had to supervise absolutely everything because they were going to give everybody a hard time, but especially me, because I was a woman. And so that first ship had 850 men and 5 women officers.
You know, I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, and so I didn't have a lot of exposure to what, you know, careers were available to me. So I thought the Navy would be a good way for me to see the world and get to know who I am and what I like to do.
I grew up in the city, in the Bronx, you know, so for me, city life was, you know, getting on the subway or getting on the bus, you know, a lot of congestion in the city, in your typical metropolitan, and going out to Fort Knox, Kentucky was just open land. Plus you're meeting individuals from other parts of the country. You know, I have a best friend that's from Boston, Bill Lyons. You know, I love him. He's like my brother. He has that Boston accent. You know, everything's park, you know. So I was like, where are these guys from? You know, so it was interesting to see that, you know, because sometimes growing up you get so tunnel vision in terms of where your world is that you forget there's more to this country other than Smithtown, other than New York State. So it was a great experience seeing other Americans from other parts of the country.
I was the 2nd woman in the class. I was 7th overall and 2nd in the class, and I got the 2nd ship. And I thought the 3rd person in line was going to kill me, but I got the 2nd ship. And so I went directly from Officer Candidate School to a ship for temporary duty, and then I came back and went to Surface Warfare Officer School again in Rhode Island, in Newport, and then went permanently back to that ship. And I was there for about a year, after, actually a little shorter than a year after I finished Surface Warfare Officer School, and I qualified as a Surface Warfare Officer, which we had these books, and they were Personnel Qualification Standards, or PQS books. And they gave us a stack of 16 small books that we had to go through and get signatures that we had done this, we had observed that, and we had tried this, and we had, and you had to stand so many watches in this place and so many watches in that place, and you had to trace out the engineering systems and the auxiliary steam system, the main steam system, the electrical boards, and you had to get all the signatures that you had done these individual things, and then you had to sit for an oral board. And so it normally took 2 years to do that for an officer after Surface Warfare Officer School to do that. I did it in a year because the ship was going to decommission, and I didn't want to start over from scratch on another ship. So I really pushed to get qualified on my first ship as a Surface Warfare Officer.
Well, my time in the service started with boot camp, but then I went to 2 years of school where I learned electronics, starting with basic electronics to advanced electronics, and then you go into your specialties. And I was an IFF technician and a onboard computer system technician. And so I did that, but then I got deployed to the fleet up in Newport, Rhode Island. And so on the ship, your job essentially is to maintain the equipment, troubleshoot it if it goes down, but maintain it. And then you do other duties depending on the ship you're on.
The Army in general it makes you very competitive, you know. So whenever I was in the reserves and doing, you know, I made second lieutenant, what I needed to make first lieutenant, what I need to make captain, and I did those things. You know, they lay it out for you. All right, you want these, you want the next rank? This is what you need to do. You need to have, you need to volunteer for challenging positions, because that's what I want to see. They want to see what sort of leadership traits do you have. Also, there's an educational side to it too. You got to take these courses too. Teaches you about leadership, teaches you about presentation, all these other things. And yeah, and I think I used those traits, and I used it when it was NYPD. You know, I always conducted myself as a military guy more than as a cop. You know, not that I was very authoritative. You know, don't get me wrong, but I conducted myself when I interacted with the general public or with my peers or my superiors. You know, they called, oh wow, Bill, you know, he looks good in uniform too. You know, everything's, you know, the gig line and the shirt, everything was, you know, perfect. You know, and they see things like that. Meanwhile, you know, you get some guys that like a crumpled shirt, you know, got like a stain on their tie. No, not me. I was just too, my OCD wouldn't allow that, you know, which I got from my mom. So
I was on 7 different ships. I started on destroyer tenders because the tenders were the only ships that were open to women. They were considered auxiliary ships. And so those were the first ones that were open to women. And then after I had been on my 3rd auxiliary ship, they opened combat logistics force ships to women, which were service ships that served combat ships. So I then went to the USS Monongahela, and I was trained to be the 1st lieutenant, which is the person in charge of all the UNREP equipment. So UNREP was my life for a little over a year. I went to a special school and learned how to run the rigs, which I didn't have to personally do. But by learning, I then knew how to supervise people who were running the rigs. And we would underway replenish by sending fuel and stores to other ships. And so that was my first combat logistics force ship. And then I went to the USS Nitro out of Earl, New Jersey here, which was an ammunition ship, which I thought it was very interesting that they named all the ammunition ships after things that blew up. The USS Butte, the Suribachi, the Nitro. So it wasn't really confidence inspiring. But anyway, so I was the executive officer on the USS Nitro, and then they started looking at, and I didn't even know this. People had said, Grace, you're never going to be a captain of a ship because, first of all, you didn't go to the Naval Academy. so you can't be a captain of a ship. And I said, well, but they took me in as, through officer candidate school. And they were like, and then they said, well, you're never going to be captain of a ship because you're a woman. And they said, you're never going to be captain of a ship because you don't have a master's degree. And they kept saying these things, but I found that the Navy, because we had only started putting the women at sea in 1978. I went in 1980. So there were some women that went to sea beforehand, before me, but I was one of the first to go directly as an ensign to sea. But as we progressed and got more senior and learned more, became more capable, the door in front of us opened. And so I went from the auxiliary ships to the combat logistics force ships, and then when I had just made commander, and I was on the Second Fleet flagship, USS Mount Whitney, as staff for the Second Fleet commander. And they called me at home from Washington, from the Pentagon, and they said, if we were to ask you to go to a combatant ship, would you go? And I said, of course I would go. And they said, if we were to select you to be the captain of a combatant ship, would you go? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, that's all we wanted to know, click. And then about 3 weeks later, a message came out, and they had selected 5 women to command combatant ships, and I was one of those 5. But they called me at home to make sure I wasn't going to say, no, I don't want to go. So, but they called, and that's what I mean about the Navy, is they opened the door when somebody was ready to walk through it. So everybody said, oh, you'll never do that because nobody's ever done it before. But the Navy's not stupid. They're not going to say, okay, we're going to open up combatant ships to women COs when they had nobody ready. So they waited till they had 5 good candidates that were ready to go, and they even called us at home and made sure we wanted to go. So I think that the Navy was pretty smart about how they handled that program.
So when you're going through the ROTC program, your mentors are non-commissioned officers, NCOs. I was fortunate that my NCO was a Vietnam veteran. He was in Special Forces. And so he distilled a lot of his learnings from the war onto the young lieutenants, And then when you get assigned to a unit as well, you should be leveraging the experience of these NCOs. A lot of times you'll have 1 or 2 lieutenants that'll come in like, hey, I'm a lieutenant, I'm gonna listen to you, because I got this silver bar, and that's total nonsense. These are NCOs that have a lot of experience, and you should leverage them. So all you future lieutenants out there, don't be the jerk. Listen to your NCOs, okay? So, and that's what I did. I was the type that I always listened. I listened more than I spoke, and I absorbed a lot from these individuals. And I give these individuals a lot of credit. I think a lot of my career was based on their mentorship and how to conduct yourself as an officer, how to hold yourself accountable, how to react in certain situations. A lot of people like to run with their hair on fire. I'm not. I'm very, very calm and collected. When I got deployed to Iraq, I could see my soldiers were a little nervous there. So listen, guys, everything's okay. When you see me running and crying, then you know it's bad. Other than just relax. We'll deal with it.
I had a great boss, even though when we first met, I walked up and he had been in the Navy for 35 years. He was a chief warrant officer, which an ensign, which is what I was, is not usually subordinate to a chief warrant officer. But in this case, it was an obvious choice, and I had no problem with it because he knew so much more than I did. But he walked up to me and he said, hello, I'm your boss. He said, I don't want women in my Navy, and I don't want women on my ship. But you're here, you do your job, and we'll be okay. And we got along great. There was no slack, and there was no pandering or anything like that. It was all work, and I worked just as hard, if not harder, than any other young officer on the ship, and so we got along great.
The way they train you forces you to become a brotherhood, right? They teach you how to work together. They teach you the importance of teamwork, and in the boot camp, they're going to break you down in a certain way that makes you build back up. And when you build back up, you build up with them. And so there's a natural bond that you build with when you're with them. But once you leave boot camp and you start to go into your training, whether you're going into school or you're going right out to the fleet, I think that your relationship with them kind of separates at that point. And it's not until later do you build those lifelong friends.
There is no one on a Navy ship that does anything alone. The whole thing is a team effort. Everyone on that ship has to work together to make it a success. And that it was a wonderful compliment to be awarded the Bronze Star. There are two versions of the Bronze Star that I have to say. That there's the Bronze Star with a V for valor, and then there's the Bronze Star for performance. So my Bronze Star was for performance and not for valor. So I have to say that because there are people that walk around with the Bronze Star with the V, which is whole level above what I wear. But I wear that Bronze Star for my sailors that perform so wonderfully. And they work themselves to the ground, into the ground. They were just wonderful. And our Marines that were embarked also, just wonderful people. I think that from the top, when you say you respect the sailors and you do everything you can to help them and to work as a team, whether you're up here or whether you're down here, it makes it all a family. So I was very happy that the Marines were included into that family, and we worked hard to do that when they were embarked, because not all ships are like that. And I actually had a stack of request chits from sailors, from Marines that were on other ships in that ARG, which were great ships also, that they wanted to come to Gunston Hall. And I thought that was a great compliment to have people saying, I would like to go to Gunston Hall because I talked to my friend and he really loves that ship. And so the Marine commander came to me, he said, what are you doing over there? And I said, I just treat everybody like family. We all work together. When we have a working party, it's a Navy, a Marine, a Navy, a Marine, a Navy, a Marine. And when we go to chow, that's what we do. Everybody merges, and we all work together. I let the Marines come up to the bridge, and I teach them how to handle the ship, and I teach them how to stand watches. And they have something to do. They need to run on the deck. We let them, and we just treat them like we would like to be treated.
I think one of the things, and I'll tell people this a lot too. I was in the Gulf War twice. And so, there were a couple situations we were in that were pretty stressful, life and death type of situations for being in the Navy, right? For as much as you can have one of those. But, you're in battle conditions on a ship, and, the thing you don't think about, well, I love my country and I love serving my country. But at that moment, all I cared about was my brothers on that ship, right? And making sure that we were all, protected and we all got to home safely. And so, that bond, that family is there. And you realize, as you said, it's not about your skin color. It's not about, the way you talk. It's not about what class you come from. It's about, understanding that you need each other. No one person can drive a ship, no matter what you think, right? Yes, it only takes one person to steer that wheel, but there's a whole bunch of other people doing a whole bunch of other things that if those things don't get done, that ship doesn't go anywhere. And so you realize that you can't do it alone, that you need a team. And that, doesn't matter, who that person is, you need to be able to trust them.
I finish ROTC. I get commissioned as a lieutenant, assigned to military intelligence. They send me to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which is the home of Intel. So whether you're an officer or enlisted, you go to Fort Huachuca to learn your Intel skill set. I did that for about 6 months, and that was from September of '90 to March of '91. Came back home, and then I was going to a 1 week in a month. I was drilling as a reservist, assigned to an intel unit, and then at the time in the late 80s, early 90s, we had the situation with Kosovo, Serbia, Croatia, with all the infighting that was going on there. So there was a peace mission came up, the Army was shorthanded on warrant officers. So they reached out to commissioned officers, in particular captains or below, to lead these teams. So I volunteered.
I took command of the USS Gunston Hall on October 23rd, 1998. And so we deployed to the Mediterranean and we in 99, and we were the ship, part of an ARG, Amphibious Ready Group, which with the Kearsarge, USS Kearsarge, which was an amphibious aircraft carrier, and the USS Ponce, LPD, and landing platform and docking. And my ship, the USS Gunston Hall, LSD, landing ship docking. And I was carrying 45 AAVs, amphibious assault vehicles, which are like a tank. They have a dual propulsion system. They have a tracking for on land, and then they have a water jet propulsion for in the water. And I also had an LCAC, landing craft air cushion, which is like a hydrofoil that could carry a tank. It was big enough to be able to carry a tank. And so we deployed to the Mediterranean with 400 Marines embarked on my ship, and the rest of the MU, Marine Expeditionary Unit, was spread on the other two ships. But I was the control ship for the amphibious landing to put the peacekeeping force into Kosovo. So that is why I was awarded the Bronze Star, and each of the COs of those ships were awarded a Bronze Star for our efforts in doing that expeditiously and efficiently and safely, and because moving 2,000 people from ship to shore while you're at sea, we didn't have any ship that pulled up to a pier. We didn't have any ship that pulled up to a beach. We had to launch all of our assets from the ships while at sea, and then support them for the 45 days that they were in there. And for that, we were awarded the Bronze Star. But I always say that the Bronze Star was not me. The Bronze Star was all of my sailors. They were awarded the Bronze Star. I just get to wear it.
And in Kosovo, our mission there was an intel mission. I can't get too specific on it, but great experience. Again, meeting individuals from other Americans, but also going to the country for the first time under the peacekeeping flag. And I can only say good things about the Albanian people. They loved us. They appreciated us. Everywhere we went, they shook our hands. Very more gracious than anything. Even now, at times when I go to certain restaurants, if I know there's Albanian, I'll greet them. I'll say "Mir dita," which is like, how are you? Good morning. And they look at you like, who the hell is this guy? Are you Albanian? I'm like, no, I'm Puerto Rican. But Mir dita, and I'll ask them, see any, they'll say mir, ipo, so I know the basics.
Well, we're in Puerto Rico. And we're docked at the pier, and an Argentinian ship pulls up behind us, and somewhere along the day they come running to our ship and yelling that they're flooding, and so we send a whole crew over there. And what I recall, what was the most memorable for me was that every one of us ran right to it. Right, we didn't stop and say, okay, what do we go do? We ran to the problem. And with our training, we were able to fix the problem and get the water out of the ship. And so, that's another thing, is that, sometimes you just have to, run forward. You have to just, put your head down and take some calculated risks and trust the training that you have. And so, don't be afraid of what you don't know, because, if you trained right, you'll be prepared. You'll know how to deal with it.
Crossing the North Atlantic in the winter is really bad. Even if you go the southern route, it's really bad. I lived for 2 years in Germany. So I did 17 years on sea duty, attached to ships. That doesn't mean I was at sea the whole time, but I was attached to ships. And then I was at Quantico Marine Corps Base for a year in Command and Staff College. And then I went to Germany as a joint officer with the Army, Air Corps, Marines, and Navy in in Germany. And living in Germany was fantastic because I lived there. So they shipped my car over. And so on the weekends when I was off, I could like get in the car and go everywhere. It was fantastic.
I have been to this point in my life, I've probably been over to 45 countries in my life. But I tell this because when I speak to young boys and girls about the potential of going into service, and I'm an advocate for the Navy, it's because by the time I was 24 years old, I'd seen so much in this world. I got to visit places that you'd only read about. So example of that, we were one of the first ships into Poland after it recently became democratic. And it was the most exciting experience. Us and another ship had pulled in. The pier was filled. I mean, thousands and thousands of people there to greet us, take our autographs. We got to have dinner at people's houses. We got to go to sporting events with a lot of the locals. And so it's just a wonderful experience. But I got to go to places, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania. I went to Finland, Denmark, Norway, Germany, you name it. I've been to it as part of being in the Navy. But also, it wasn't just always in Europe, although I was an East Coast sailor, which means I primarily was over in Europe. The ship I was on was a frigate, so we did a lot of what we call law enforcement operations, or LEO ops, which is drug running down in the Caribbean. And so, we would do our operations and then you'd pull into Caribbean islands. And so it was a pretty neat experience when you're pulling into some of these really exotic places as a young kid and get to spend 2 or 3 days there on liberty. So
it's very hard. I can say, oh, the country was beautiful, but when you try to describe a place, it's very hard first to describe just the scenery, but also the sights and the smell. So at times, because of Kosovo, there's a lot of wood burning going on over there because that's how their primary source of heat there. So there are times when I'm walking around, I'll smell wood burning, and distinctively I would think of, oh, it reminds me of Kosovo. Balkans, it was a great time. The winters of the Balkans, they don't shovel out there. I fell on my tukas a couple of times. Here's the American coming down, the captain, and not very cool look. There were some times when our missions was canceled because the streets were just too treacherous. You can't drive a Humvee down the road. I'm like, that's kind of bad.
And my favorite watch was the 4 to 8 because I got to watch the sunrise, and especially if you were heading east into the sunrise, I got to watch the sunrise. And I also got cinnamon rolls because the bakers would make cinnamon rolls first thing in the morning, and they would call the bridge, or you could smell them, and I would call down to the bakery and say, "Are they ready yet?" And they would bring a tray up to the bridge with some fresh coffee, and it was the best watch.
There was a moment when we're getting, we call it a smashed, and we're getting, drilled pretty hard, and one of the chiefs or one of the drill sergeants asked, if there's anybody man enough to take over this position. And I don't know what happened or what made me do it, but I kind of went from parade rest to attention, took a step forward and yelled, "I can do it." And that moment taught me something, right? And of course, he put me into the position, right? I took the initiative to do that. And what it taught me at that moment was there's nothing I can't do if I'm willing to step forward. And so that has been a memory and a lesson that has served with me all my life. And I've used it and I've been successful because of it.
People talk about, oh, isn't this scary? Isn't that scary? I keep honeybees and they say, oh, that would be scary. And I said, yeah, right. The first time when I was walking down the pier in Norfolk and there were 6 ships on this side and 6 ships on that side, and all the men were hanging off the rails, whistling and catcalling. And I kept my head straight and I walked down the pier to my ship, which was all the way at the end. That was a little scary. After that, nothing scared me.
It was a great experience for me, and I can look back and smile, and how many people can say, here's this kid from the Bronx that went from a lieutenant, and when I remember one day I'm in Fort Bragg, I'm sitting on the stand. I just finished doing like a land nav. I'm like, boy, it'd be great if I ever make it a captain, and I made it a full bird colonel, 06, and never in 1,000 years would I thought that would have occurred. And so I'm very grateful and I'm very humbled that I was given that opportunity. remember distinctively in 9/11, I was in beautiful Fort Polk, Louisiana. For those of you in the Army, if you know Fort Polk, you know it's not beautiful. It's considered the armpit of the Army. There's nothing going on there. But what they do is the Army uses these bases as training sites. So what they do is they create these mock towns based on whatever, in this instance I was going to Kosovo, so that they build a mock town with folks that spoke Albanian, and you conduct the mission. So it was pretty much like a training exercise, but with live actors. You know, so you trained with the unit that you were deploying with. At this time, it was with 10th Mountain out of Fort Drum, New York. I was assigned to them, and we went there. And then 9/11 happened, and you know, I remember distinctively going to my office that morning and hearing about a plane hit one of the towers. Now, at the time, I'm a New York City police officer. You know, I joined the department, as a matter of fact, a month after I returned from Fort Huachuca. So I joined the transit police in 1991, back when it was a separate police department. And then in 95, we merged. And so 9/11 happens, and I just picked up the phone and I called my unit in NYPD, and the person that picked up, Doris Rosado, who is now living in Florida. So Doris, if you ever see this, I love you. She was also an Air Force reservist. She was an E7 at the time. And I was a sergeant at the time with NYPD. And she was like, Sarge, this is bad. And as she was talking, she had the radio going on in the background, and I can hear the screams of the cops saying that another plane hit the tower. So right there and then we knew that something was up. And came back to New York about a week after 9/11. Saw the destruction, and then a month later I was deployed to Kosovo.
When I was in communications field, so I was with satellite communications. I was a multi-channel radio equipment operator, and right after I got out of all of my basic training and my MOS school, 9/11 happened, and communications went down, if everybody remembers it.
We went down there to 9/11.
You could see it's of course microscopic, you don't usually see, but when it's all clumped together, the ash, the soot, everything in the air, you could smell it and you can see it. It was just burning metal and human flesh, and that's kind of where it all just came together, that it was my generation's call to step up now.
I told my wife, pack me a bag. I was a New York City fireman. I was a retired New York City fireman, so it says, I called a couple of friends of mine, 2 lieutenants, and one lieutenant says, if he's going down, tell him I'm going with him. And then he's getting dressed.
I said, what? I just got out of my training.
Yeah, the Marines. I said, where are you going? He said, you got to report to your base. We're at war now. He said, I'm going with you, Dad, that's it.
So I packed a bag too.
Everything goes back to 9/11. That's the whole reason why I joined, and it always has a tie. I think about, I know how that person feels. I got to actually serve on the USS New York. I was the public affairs officer for the 10-year anniversary, so if people go and archive a picture of USS New York in New York Harbor, if you see little fingers holding the flag down, one of those hands were me. My friend Kaylee and Rosie Gashinsky, who's now probably follow-on commanding officer. We were all junior officers together, lieutenants, ensign, and Rosie Gashinsky was a lieutenant, about to be lieutenant commander. But we were there holding the flag down, literally during the backdrop of the ceremony in the morning. And I was the public affairs officer on the maiden deployment, but just to let people know, it has, I think, 9.5. I remember years ago during the deployment, we always had that in all the press releases. It was, I believe, 9.5 tons of World Trade Center steel forged in the keel. When I stepped on board, and every single person who said they stepped on board, it is not just a floating museum, living museum, but people may not be religious. I am. Even if I wasn't, I noticed from people stepping on board, they said they feel the spirits.
And so I went to Marine combat training, run through the School of Infantry. I was an artilleryman, so after that, more specifically, I was a scout observer. So after Marine combat training, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for my artillery school. And then from there, I went to a naval base at Coronado out in California to learn about naval gunfire. But other than that, training is pretty much continuous throughout. You know, you got to keep sharp while you're in there.
So I went off to boot camp. So like I had mentioned earlier, I was supposed to technically be class of 2002. So all my grade school friends, while they're having their graduation parties, I'm already off at boot camp for the first time. I'm meeting people who are right out of high school. Some people were foster kids, adopted, didn't really have much of an upbringing. So it literally is all these people. Some people had masters, PhDs they enlisted because I was part of that 9/11 group. They left great jobs. Years later, I remember they had professional football players who left to join, and it was just, like I said, that generation. Our generation's Pearl Harbor. There was no question about what you should be doing in some way, somehow, some capacity.
I was a sergeant in the Marines. I joined in January 2001, and I got out in 2007.
Basically, the way I looked at it is I knew what I was getting myself into because there had already been fighting for a couple of years, and I was going to go fight, and I wanted to have, you know, I mean, I'm sure an Army guy or whatever will argue this, but I wanted to have like what I've always heard were the best. You know, I want that person next to me fighting, you know, opposed to other branches, and you know, no offense to them, they do their job.
I didn't deploy until January 2003.
It was, I believe, February 2010 when I had gotten sent down to Kandahar because as a public affairs officer, a lot of media interest, I go to help facilitate.
I mean, when we get off the plane, we had to go to Iraq via Kuwait, and that was extremely hot. Like when we got off the plane, I got hit with a blast of heat. I thought it was from the engine, from the jet, but it was just the wind blowing the hot air on me. But conversely, yes, when we went to Iraq, I was there during the winter, and it gets very cold there at night. There's, you know, it actually had some flurries of snow, which, you know, it was a rarity, I guess, for the area, but it actually snowed a little bit while we were there.
We went to Africa. We also took a trip over to Okinawa, Japan for a couple of weeks. And obviously my deployments to Kuwait and Iraq were...
Did you go to France or Italy?
No.
On the way back one
flew
trip?
over it.
Oh,
flew around it.
Kandahar was unfortunately one of the hardest hit for the provinces with casualties. In the intel centers and where, you know, the watch floors, where we were watching the news feeds, whether someone was recording live, we could see the live feed and everything. Our job was also to assess, you know, was that accurate in reporting? Was that really what we said? Which I'll tell you, it was blown out of proportion sometimes. It's all about ratings because it freaked my family out. And as I'm talking on the phone, we had air raids and everything. And I said, no, it's not that bad. It's typical. Just as long as it doesn't hit the building.
I was, like I said, I'm an artilleryman, but I get attached to infantry battalion, right? So I served, you know, 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. I was, you know, I was the FO. I was mainly with Lima Company 2nd Platoon there. And so the year prior, I was on top of a house, and Overwatch started taking sniper fire. So I, you know, grabbed my radio and my binoculars, trying to find a sniper hide. Long story short, I ended up getting tagged by the sniper in the chest. I mean, my vest stopped it or whatever, but so I was with the same battalion the following year, the next deployment, and you know, just a little something nice to be recognized. And General Petraeus was in charge of all the forces in Iraq at the time, so he gave me what's called a challenge coin there. And kind of a funny story with it though. Like I had finished my shift in the COC then. I was out for a jog. Someone came up running and said, "Hey, listen," like, 'cause I didn't know this was happening at all. It's like, you need to take a shower and get over there. I missed a button, so. Here I am, you know, I meet this general who's in charge of everybody, you know, everybody well known, you know, you see him on TV. And he was like, "Hey, you missed a button, son." So I have a general button up my shirt there. So that was pretty silly, but.
There were some things that happened in Afghanistan that I never thought. I was just public affairs, but going through hospitals after rocket attacks, people deliberately blowing up markets, and there's children, limbs missing. Foot patrols that I had gone on where a week or two after, the whole entire team was killed. So for me, people had told me, like speaking with chaplains and going through counseling, it was the survivor's guilt. Why them and not me? And then same within Kandahar. There would be rocket attacks nearby. I would go up to, fences and give the candy. I was like, maybe I'm religious, and, that's part of why I do feel, close to God and everything, and protected me. They always told us, don't go up to the fence line because you are a target. No matter, they could use the children as, the bait, and they deliberately are trying to get you to hand the candy, and as you're distracted going in the bag, they shoot you. Well, I mean, it wasn't like a court-martial defense or anything, but I still was making a risk, and I still went up and gave the kids candy. I have a weakness for kids, and sure enough, there were people who would end up, while I was stationed there or when I had come home, the same exact location, they were shot and killed and not me. And I would say, how and why?
To me, the flag represents a responsibility to freedom. And I don't understand some of the people today who would rather trample on the flag, but yet they want to live here because they are free, and they don't give two thoughts about why they're free.
We fought for that flag. A lot of people died for that flag, and I think most Americans, if they look back in their history far enough, they'll find somebody in their history that died for that flag.
The biggest piece about the American flag is those flags were what draped those caskets and honorably sent them home.
In Smithtown, 1966, this was like, could have been Utah. I mean, it was very, it wasn't New York City, it wasn't Greenwich Village. And when I came back in '68, it had changed. There was a lot more, free thinking and thinking, speaking out against the war, against the draft. And, then as now, there was still, anti-flag or anti-patriotism things. And I think even then, they used to remember, as a soldier, as anybody in the military, one of the things that you're fighting for is to preserve their right to object, their right to protest, their right to, voice their own opinion. So I think the flag, also gives them that right. I mean, I hate to see it abused. I hate to see it taken for granted. But exactly what we all stood up for, whether you're, however you think, it gives you the right to express your thoughts. What's troublesome now is that it doesn't seem to be any patience for anybody else's point of view, which is really, is really what the flag does not stand for.
If veterans didn't join the armed forces and go fight for the freedom in this country, make no mistake about it, it would not be a free country.
We had a great big flag spread right across the two houses like that. And that was on different blocks,
It's the most beautiful thing you ever can see.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
It means everything. I am where I am because of the American flag, and the sacrifices that were made by the individuals that wore that flag on their shoulders, and I think we get lost, nowadays, especially now with the media, there's a segment of our population that is just hating on the flag. These are individuals that had never stepped foot out of this country and experienced what life is in Kosovo and the challenges they face, or gone to the Middle East and see what's going on over there. I had Iraqis that would come up to me and thanking us for interjecting ourselves there, and making a sacrifice for these things. It's so easy to become a text warrior when you're behind your phone, and voicing your displeasure. But what have you done?
And they dropped to tell the, join us, we'll help you. And a girl in the cleaners that I go to is Vietnamese. She read it to me in Vietnamese and English. And her mother, who works in the back, they all came around. And she said what they're telling them to do is to give up and surrender to the Americans, and you'll have a great life.
As a fighting Marine and all the military, all the Korean War vets, we created a country. We literally created a country. There was no country.
And particularly, we were very well treated by the Korean community.
And people really don't know how lucky, they are just to wake up in this country,
I would strongly recommend service. It's a very maturing experience.
But I would love to see more people going into the military. It's a great experience, it's a great life, and I don't think you'll ever learn the camaraderie or the dependability on one another. Like in the military, there are no exceptions, and there is no race. You're all one, and you work together.
To step up some more knowledge of what, what's needed, what's required of you.
But a lot of people also don't understand that a veteran just don't leave the battlefield.
We'll never abandon the young men and women that are serving today. Like I said, never again will one generation of veterans abandon another.
And the veterans need people to advocate for them.
And I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was going in the Army.
I think it makes you grow up fast. I was only 18, and the day they put the dog tags around my neck, I became a man.
But it was a good experience.
Proud to be a veteran. I'm glad I was able to join.
I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I like the Navy. To tell you the truth, if I wasn't married, I even gave it a thought maybe to go another 4 years. It was a great, I like it. It was good. I like the Navy.
There's not a day that I don't think about it, that I'd like to find a way to go back in and serve. So, that calling is going to be with a lot of people, and it's going to stay with you whether you're in or not.
I love being at sea. There is nothing like being on a Navy ship in the middle of the ocean, whether you're alone or whether you're with a carrier battle group. There's nothing like being in the middle of the ocean and having command of that ship or standing watch on the bridge. I love to stand watch on the bridge. And even when I was crossing the Atlantic in the winter, I still love to stand watch on the bridge. When I have a young fellow or a girl, young lady come up to me and say thank you, it takes me back. It's really refreshing to see.
I'm 93 years old, so I had a good life. Really, I had a good life.
We don't fade away. We guard the streets of heaven.